Let's get into it. Coach Colin here. We are talking about the people who Joe Rogan is avoiding or doesn't want to talk to, supposedly. That's not even my theory. That is their theories, okay? I'm going to bring up two people, and then there's a third honorable mention that a lot of you guys actually know about, but I'll mention him at the end. But the first person that is claiming that Joe does not want her on the podcast is none other than this lady right here. If you guys don't know who this is Whitney Webb. I like the color of her shirt. I like it. I like it. Matches. But she claims that Joe doesn't want her on the podcast. In fact, there was this whole thing that happened where she was mentioned by Ian Carroll while Ian was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he said that she came off as unhinged and then praised her new book. And then she replied to Ian. Ian came back to her. He was completely just like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You really, you should listen to the video he made. Like, he's really like sucking up to her, I think. And well deserved in terms of two researchers. She is the OG and he is very new in that whole game. So from there, she ends up saying that there is some kind of theory. Now, I will show this really quick. This is her, a tweet that she made. She actually said, Joe Rogan mentioned my reporting many times. I literally wrote a 1,000-page book on Jeffrey and was actually doing the network behind it. Oh, and doing what he was actually doing and the network behind him. But somehow he platformed an agency contractor like Peter Thiel and asked him about Jeffrey, but not me. Fancy that. She has been talking about this for a while. And in fact, she was even on this podcast. A lot of you guys have requested that Sabs be on my podcast or I be on her podcast. I don't know her. I don't know what we would talk about. That's, you guys would have to fill me in on that in the comments. But she did ask Whitney about Joe Rogan, and Whitney had this to say.
Destroys everyone's constitutional rights and contracts.
Whoa. Is that... Listen, YouTube now lets you listen to things at double speed, triple speed, and you know your boy goes triple speed. All right, let's get into it.
With the state in a public-private partnership, it's really not that functionally different at the end of the day than having it being run out of DARPA like it was originally.
That's right. It's all connected. I have one more for you, Whitney. There are many of us that saw an appearance by Ian Carroll on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about your work. And I have had this question for quite some time. Why haven't you been on to Joe Rogan's podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I've been name dropped on there by Rogan and other people and have not been invited on. And I mean, obviously it's fine. I don't need to go on there. But I found it strange that, he would have another person on to talk about my book. That's not me. And I would argue, again, this is speculative, but I would argue that, the fact that I don't really like either party is very inconvenient to some large platforms. And so, instead, a person that, promoted my research, which, thanks for doing that, but that promoted my research, but their solution, unlike mine, is to vote Trump. I think that's more convenient. It's a more convenient package for my research than perhaps what I would say. And also in that appearance, Ian Carroll, even though he promoted my book, said that my work on Peter Thiel and Palantir was unhinged, was the term that he used, without really explaining so. And it's kind of ironic that he would do that because for being such a big fan of my book, at the end of the book, I talk about how Palantir is the new Jeffrey Epstein. And in the age of Palantir, you do not need someone like Jeffrey Epstein or any other figure in history that engaged in sex blackmail. You don't need to do that kind of operation anymore. You can just either harvest all of the data you would need for blackmail off of people's digital devices, or you plant things on their devices that are incriminating but don't actually belong to them.
Now, that's very interesting. The reason I let that clip play a little long, remember what she just said, because the other guest, Joe apparently doesn't want to talk to, touches on this, and it's very, very interesting, but just remember that. But that is her answer towards what was going on with Joe and Ian Carroll. So she thinks that there's something going on, and honestly, you guys know me. I am the biggest Joe Rogan fan. I am watching all of his stuff all the time. The episodes that you think are boring, I'm watching multiple times. So it is a little odd. It is a little odd. He has been mentioning Whitney for years. For years, he's been talking about things that he's read from her, things that he's seen online from her, but never actually bringing her onto the show. It does seem a little odd, and you could say it seems convenient now. In the past, I don't know, I want to say 2 years, that Rogan has kind of made this shift into, being, who he is, helping the president win the election and things of that nature, being a president maker. It has shifted. Being good friends with Elon, it has shifted. Being good friends with Peter, so it has shifted quite a bit for him. But it still doesn't explain why years ago he didn't do it. It makes sense now, because honestly, Joe has worked himself. Listen, Whitney has worked herself into, no pun intended, realizing the full web of what's going on in the world, and Joe has worked himself into the web of it all. I mean, whether intentionally or unintentionally, he knows the DNI now. He knows the director of the FBI. He knows the president. He knows the vice president. You know what I mean? Mike Baker is his good friend that they talk all the time, and he was ex-CIA. You know what I mean? He has access to all these people, and it goes from not wanting someone on the podcast because you're going to have to deal with the headache of all the news that comes out about it when they say certain things. And believe me, Whitney has some stuff to say. If you haven't looked into her work, look into it. It will blow your mind. It goes from that to actually having to be in front of that person or get the text from that person of, hey, why did you let this lady say all these things about me? I'm just saying, it seems very odd. But let's jump over here and actually hear what Joe has to say about the whole thing. Okay? Joe actually does mention this. Let's go.
4 things in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Seems a bit much.
What's Whitney Webb's take on this?
I bet she's probably, Whitney's research is so unbelievable.
Oh, but by the way, I should say, before I go any further than that, Whitney Webb has some strange conspiracy that she believes someone's trying to keep her from being on my show.
Interesting.
Yeah, Whitney, I'll have you on the show. I just haven't reached out because I have thousands of people to go through. That's
He's
all
busy.
it is. I would definitely do it, though.
We've had Whitney on a bunch.
The idea that I wouldn't do it is incorrect, and I apologize.
She's enormously...
autistic?
Well, there's a lot of this. She talks like this a lot, and she's just, the pentameter of her voice is very like this, and she goes...
She knows a lot.
She knows a lot about things. She goes, Jeffrey Epstein, on the 3rd day in January 1996, he met with this guy. But she...
With no notes. No notes. She's off the top of the head. Yeah.
But she's really enormously amazing at research. Mm-hmm. She's an amazing researcher. She has compiled the data.
Yeah. No, she definitely has. And how they kill all those people in Germany? Nobody's whacked her yet.
She's somewhere in South America, I think.
Good move.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how much resources does she have to protect herself down there?
One of the reasons I think people like her end up being safe is she writes these very big, very studious books that no one in America reads.
That's it. Where no one, it's not a threat.
It's not a
because
threat.
it doesn't go mainstream.
It's not a threat. Now, these big Hollywood types that go, I'm going to blow the whistle on whatever the hell's going on. They go, bye-bye.
That's actually, I never thought of that. If she, and maybe that's why Ian Carroll gets more clout, more notoriety than she does. Because if she made what she researches super entertaining and digestible, I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't watch and listen to her stuff. But I guess she doesn't know how to do that. It's hard to be entertaining. It's not something that comes easy. It seems like the entertaining people are just doing nothing and they're just talking, but there's a There's an art to it, if I could say that. Now, here's the thing, though. Joe says there's 1,000 people that he has to go through first. I don't really know about that. Here's the thing. I would think, as somebody who's watched Joe so much, I would think how it works is he has his core friends who they can come on the podcast whenever they want. If they're in town, come on the podcast. Yeah, don't worry. We'll bump this person. We'll move that person. They're his friends. He's going to have them on because he wants them to get that clout. He wants them to get that push. He wants them to get that exposure. Then the next bucket of people would be people Joe is really interested in talking to. Really, really wants to talk to, right? Has their books, watches their stuff, like really wants to talk to them. And then the third bucket would be people who really want to be on his show, right? People that he maybe doesn't know really well, but their people reached out to his people, and now they're saying, hey, you know, this guy's going to be here at this time. They really want to get on the show, blah, blah, blah. They'll pay for their own flight and they'll pay for their own hotel. They really want to be, and they're hoping they can get in on this week. There's that bucket. That's what I would think. And here's the thing. This is why I think that. Ian Carroll hasn't been doing it as long as Whitney Webb. And Ian Carroll hasn't been doing it as extensively as Whitney. So how did Ian get on? If there's thousands of people, right? If there's 1,000 people to go through, how did Ian get on 6 months ago? You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. Because Ian, not really a friend of his. He doesn't know Ian all that much. I'm sure they're friends now. But I'm just saying. Just saying. And then you say there's 1,000 people, so then it becomes, that's like a year and a half. So we're not going to see her on the podcast until what, 2026, 2027? We're all going to forget by then. Are you kidding me? It's going to be near the next election. Everybody's going to forget by then. So I can't tell. He says he wants to interview her, but he hasn't, and he completely has the ability as the guy who runs the show to say, move these 3 people. I want Whitney here. He has the ability to do that. He talks to Mike Baker 47 times a year. Talks to Dave Smith every 4 days. Has the time. You know what I mean? Or I shouldn't say has the time. Has the ability to do what he wants. He's Joe Rogan, for God's sakes. Now, let's move on to the next person that apparently is not wanted on the Joe Rogan Experience, and that is Bustamante. Bustamante, if you don't know about Bustamante, Bustamante is they say he's a former spy for the agency. You know how I feel about that whole former ex thing. You know how I feel about that. I think once you're in there, you're always in there. I don't know. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I don't know. I would have to actually talk to somebody who's a part of it. And even if they told me different, I don't know if I'd believe them either. Because I'd be like, you're saying you're an ex. You know what I mean? But this guy apparently says that Joe Rogan does not want to talk to him. Now, that might be surprising for a lot of you, but he actually discusses it with Patrick Bet-David here. Listen to this.
You've pretty much done everybody. You've done Friedman, because that one did very well. You've done Diary of CEO. I think you've done Ryan.
Yep.
So you haven't done Tucker. You've not done Rogan.
I've not done Rogan.
Why haven't you done Rogan yet?
So Rogan actually knowingly is passing me up. Yeah. So I have a book coming out. I know we've talked about it off camera. I have a book coming up. My publisher actually reached out to the Joe Rogan show to make sure they were aware of me and my upcoming book. And their producer wrote back and said, Joe knows Andy. Joe's been tracking Andy, and Joe does not want to talk to Andy.
Very interesting.
I don't know why. I have a silly theory because when I interviewed with Lex, and I have tremendous respect for Lex Friedman. When I interviewed with Lex, it was before I really understood that during these interviews, there's a bit of a game that you play with the host, right? So I made Lex look bad on his own show. And a lot of the comments that came out afterwards, a lot of the reason that that show did so well is because people are commenting on what their opinions are for the ways that I made Lex look bad. And there are apparently a lot of people out there that liked Lex looking bad. And then when that started going to Twitter and that started going to Instagram, I actually got some messages from Lex saying, why would you encourage people to say such mean things?
He said that to you?
Yeah.
Lex said that to you?
Yeah. And I went back and I wasn't even tracking social media, right? So I went back into my social media feed and I saw where people were saying bad things, and I saw where I had clicked thumbs up on whatever they were saying, just because I was clicking, like to everything. And I actually wrote Lex back and I was like, hey man, I don't really know what I'm doing. I apologize for hurting your feelings. Let me go back and recant it. And there's actually on Twitter, you can see me going back and saying, hey, Lex was a great interviewer. If you think I looked good on this interview, it's only because he was asking good questions. And, but nevertheless, when I left Lex's studio, he and Joe Rogan are good friends. And he was like, Joe's just down the street. I bet Joe would love to have a conversation with you. And then just a few days later, everything went tits up on the internet and Lex stopped talking to me. So if there's...
Well, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I don't see... Joe is very loyal to his friends. Very loyal. To his core friends, very loyal to him. So I'm not surprised. That's probably what could have happened, because he really likes Lex and they have a very good relationship together. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
So I actually think Joe would very much enjoy talking to you. But one thing I love about Joe said the following. The first time I went on Joe Rogan, Joe reached out. I didn't reach out. I'm like, hey, we had a conversation exchange. Like, hey, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, sure. Boom. And then we went out there, and that's kind of how it happened. And then the second time around, he opened up his club. I wanted to go.
See that? He was just like, hey, you want to do a podcast? Bang, it just happened. That was it. So he could do that with Whitney, but you know what I mean?
See his club. And then he said, hey, if you're down here, you want to do a podcast? Sure, let's do a podcast. And I gave him the few gifts, which, by the way, man, let me tell you, I don't know if you saw when I gave him the gifts, the comment section. They were not, I will never, ever give anybody a gift after if you go back and look at my history of me having, like when I had Kobe Bryant, I gave him a gift. He was trying to be a producer. I gave him a signed copy of all the Star Wars people signing that. When I had Mark Cuban on 10 or 11 years ago, I gave him a gift. I know he's an Atlas Shrugged guy. I gave him original, first print, first cover, everything. Like, you can't find that. It's a very tough book to find. He didn't have one. He was thankful. We're always giving gifts from the Middle Eastern side. Sean Ryan gives gifts as well, I think. But I'm like, yeah, next time if I got a gift for Joe, can you turn off the camera, man? I'm going to give it to you afterwards. But yeah, I mean, look, hopefully that'll happen eventually. Fed. You hear stories with Fed.
So that is the story. Okay, so Joe does not want to talk to this guy because of what he did with Lex Fridman. Now, I mean, Lex is a great guy. I don't think Lex is a bad guy. Some people like his podcast, some people don't. I tend to like it. It goes deeper. I love when I have a Joe Rogan episode that I watch and then Lex has interviewed the same person, because they just go in deeper. They go deeper. And it seems like they're less nervous with Lex, whereas on the big Joe Rogan podcast, they're a little taken back by the whole thing. So, because in Lex's studio, it's just him. That's another person Joe does not want to talk to. The honorable mention that a lot of you might find sad, I actually find this very sad, is Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson has not been on the podcast for quite some time. And I would say he needs to be. I hope he comes back on with Graham Hancock. I hope that relationship is mended. But apparently what happened was Joe had Joe meets Randall Carlson through Graham Hancock, right? So we all remember those episodes because they're some of the best episodes, where it's Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, Joe Rogan. They're all together. And they give a great podcast. Joe takes a liking to Randall. I think Randall even does his own where he's just like by himself. And then Randall brings somebody on the podcast. Apparently this guy, don't know how to phrase this. I'll say allegedly, I don't know. But basically, the dude was completely fugazi. The tech that he was talking about, the findings, etc., it was all just weird fugazi stuff. And at the end of the day, the guy was just trying to get money. Maybe not money from Joe, but he was trying to sell something more so than just talk about discoveries and things of that nature, like Graham does and like Carlson does when he comes on. So it was a podcast that they didn't even release. Joe said, we cannot release this. This guy's fugazi. Can't have this. So they trashed the episode. It's actually one of the lost episodes. There's only about 4 lost episodes, maybe 5. And that's one of them. And ever since that time, their relationship was damaged because Joe trusted Randall to bring on somebody who was legit. And his first time out bringing someone onto the podcast, he does not bring someone who's legit. And we haven't seen Randall on too much since. I don't think he's been on at all since, quite honestly. So that's sad. That's the honorable mention. I hope to see Randall. Whitney, I'm either way. You know what I mean? There's some people who are too dry. They can't make things entertaining. So I'm like, I could go for it or not have it at all. I don't care. Bustamante, I wouldn't want to see him on the podcast at all, really. And Randall, I really want to see on the podcast. Really want to see on the podcast. I think he's one of the amazing guests of the Joe Rogan experience. You know, like he's in there in the top 10, I would say. But anyways, those are the people who Joe does not want to sit with anymore. Let me know who out of those three would you want to see on the show the most. Let me know in the comments. Other than that, I'm out of here.